Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the file manager in WeBWorK. So the WeBWorK system itself runs off of a database, and the way that you can interact with that database is by uploading files and either or downloading files and either importing or exporting them from the database itself. So let's take a look at the file manager, and you'll see it's got a nice user interface thanks to David Cervone. There are many sort of obvious things that you can do. You can select a file or files. You can click View and view the file. So this, for instance, is an example of a homework set definition file. So you can view text files. You can also edit text files. I suppose I need to refresh the page to do that. Edit text files will give you a nice simple editor for text files. You can type in your changes. So for instance, if I wanted to make a different point value, or sorry, is it number of attempts? I forget. For this first problem in the homework set, I could make the changes and click Save. I don't actually want to save that right now, though. You can take a file and, oops, I need to refresh. You can take a file and download it to your hard drive. And my browser is set to automatically down things to a specific folder. You can see that I actually did download that file, and I could go ahead and view that file on my hard drive if I wanted to. How do we interact with directories? Let's suppose that you had written an interesting macro file and you wanted to share it with someone else. You could try downloading a directory, but it's going to say, hey, you can't download directories. So how do we do that instead? Well, if you click the directory and then click the Make Archive button, you'll make a tarred and gzipped, a compressed single file out of everything in that directory. And you'll notice that a new file was created called macros.tgz, which is just an ordinary file and can be downloaded to my local computer. Okay, show archiving. Archive the entire templates directory is the next thing on the list. So the file browser opens in what's called the course templates directory. And if we wanted to go up a directory, we could either choose one of the other options from this drop-down menu, or we could click the Go Up a Directory button right next to it. So now we're viewing everything that's in the folder 2015 Prep Problem Authoring. And you can see that there is a course templates folder that we were just in. Simple.conf is a configuration file for WeBWorK. Course.conf is another configuration file for WeBWorK. The HTML directory is a place where if you're writing problems and you have some experimental thing that you want to make deliverable to the students, you can put it in the HTML directory. These could be images, they could be JavaScript, they could be Flash, basically anything you'd like to deliver to students you could put in here. Going back up a directory to the root directory for this course, we'll see that there is a logs directory that will show the answer log and the login.log file, and those can be downloaded. And there's a scoring directory. So at the end of the semester, when you want to get the scores out of WeBWorK for assigning grades, all of those scores will be stored in comma-separated files, CSV files, in this scoring directory. Okay, and our goal was to archive the entire templates directory. So just like before, we're trying to download an entire directory. That doesn't work directly, so we'll just make an archive, a tar gunzip file, TGZ file, which we can then download to our local machine. Okay, so shown downloading, let's show some uploading. So going back to the course templates file, which is the default when you click the file manager. You'll see, where is it? Here it is. You'll see an upload button. If you try to click that upload button, nothing happens because the uploading is a two-step process. You need to first choose a file. So we'll click the Choose File button, and on my desktop, I have a class list file already made up. And I'm going to, now that I've chosen that class list file, I'm going to upload that file by clicking the Upload button. And there is that class list file. So let's take a look at this file. It's just a plain comma-separated file. And let's view what it looks like. So you can create this file in Microsoft Excel or an equivalent spreadsheet editor and just save it as a CSV file. Change the extension from CSV to .lst, and then WeBWorK will be ready to roll with your user account information. So this particular file is what we're going to use to create the user accounts. There's a column for student ID, last name and first name. The status is whether students are enrolled or auditing or things like that. You can include comments. You can separate students into different sections or even down to recitations. You should definitely include their email address and user ID. The password you can leave blank. It'll be automatically defaulted to the value of the student ID. And the permission level, you can also, is this last column, you can also leave that blank. So by leaving it blank, you will create just student level accounts, not professor level or TA level or administrator level accounts. Okay, so that gives us insight to what this class list file actually looks like. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and delete this TGZ file that I created earlier, and let's go ahead and practice uploading a TGZ file. Okay, so I've created a couple of TGZ files. Let's go ahead and try to upload this macros.tgz file that we downloaded earlier. So we choose it, and then click the Upload button. And we don't see any status updates above, but scrolling down, we see that this file was unpacked successfully, and there was one file in that directory that was successfully unpacked. Later on, we'll see that you can package up homework sets and other things into TGZ files as a way of archiving them to your local machine, and you can then share that archive either with your course the next semester or with some other professor, and all they have to do is upload it. And in the case of homework sets, they'll have to upload the homework set definition files and then make the WeBWorK database use those files by importing the results of those homework set definition files into the database itself. Okay, so now that we've talked about the file manager and we've uploaded the class list file, let's talk about how you actually create user accounts. So under Instructor Tools, you'll see the Classlist Editor button, and that seems like an obvious place to start. So let's add a new student by selecting the Add tab, and how about we create a new account for Sherlock Holmes. And so normally universities assign an ID number that's unique to each student. You'll want to use that student ID number here. Let's suppose for this fictional character, Sherlock Holmes, that his student ID is 1000. We'll give him a login name and an email. And optionally, we could say that he was in section 2 of the course, and the recitation he was in, I don't know, the recitation 3. And in the comment section, we can put whatever we like. 221B Baker Street or something. Okay, so we haven't yet created the student account. We can choose one set or multiple sets. So I just clicked and then held down Shift and used the arrow keys to select multiple sets. You could also click and hold down Control and click another set while holding down Control to choose individual sets instead of consecutive sets. Scrolling down further and clicking the Add Students button, we will have created this new student account. And okay, so the login and student ID are Sherlock and 1000. So let's go ahead and log out and try to log in as Sherlock using Sherlock and 1000. And sure enough, sure we can save that password. And sure enough, we get the student interface to WeBWorK here, and you can see that the students don't have any instructor tools over on the left-hand side. Okay, so that's how you would create one account. And you have the option of manually creating multiple accounts at the same time. Through the Classlist Editor add, we can add 10 students at a time if we wanted. We just get a bigger table to fill in entries. But in fact, it's typically a lot quicker to download information from the registrar to create a spreadsheet and then upload that spreadsheet to WeBWorK, that class list file that we talked about earlier, and then create the user accounts in the database from that class list file. Okay, so as long as we're talking about class list files, I briefly talked about the class list file before, and if we Google for WeBWorK class list file, we'll find one of the wonderful WeBWorK wiki pages that explains in detail probably more than you'd want to know about class list files. It tells you what all the limitations are. It tells you that things that start with a pound sign are lines that start with a pound sign are ignored, for instance. And it tells you all the fields and what they mean, and it gives you a list of permission levels. So guests can do hardly anything. Students can submit answers. Proctors and TAs are allowed to view some things that students are not. Professors have pretty unlimited powers, and administrators do as well. And then down below, they give you a sample class list file that you could just copy and paste into WeBWorK as a file and then create accounts from it. Okay, we already have such a file. Remember back here in the class list in the file manager, we uploaded this class list file. And before we start, let's go ahead and edit it. Notice that on that WeBWorK help page on the wiki, it said that lines that begin with a comment, character, the pound sign, or hashtag will not actually get processed by WeBWorK. So let's go ahead and comment out these headers for the columns, since we're not going to need them later. Okay, so we got this file, this class list file, we've uploaded it to WeBWorK. How do we actually create the user accounts? Well, it's sort of what you'd expect. There is an import and export feature on the class list editor. And if we select the import tab, because we have named our file with a .lst extension, it's going to show up automatically as one of the options for class list files. And all we have to do now is choose that and click Add Users. And it gives us a status report. 26 users were added, nobody was skipped. The skipped users list is empty. So everything is looking good. Now everybody has a student account in WeBWorK because WeBWorK does not particularly like spaces in names. Some names like DeAngelis, they might normally have a space in there. I just got rid of that space in the last name. And capitalization should be followed. Right now, I think it would be a good idea for all of you to log into the course and to change your password. So, for instance, if I were to log in as Sherlock, I'd be presented with a few options over here. One of them is user settings. Clicking on user settings gives me an option to change my password. Sherlock's initial password was 1000. Let's say that Sherlock changes it to 200, which is probably his IQ. And then scrolls down and clicks change user settings. And it gives us a good message that the password's been changed, and if we log out as Sherlock and log in again as Sherlock, if we use the original password of 1000, we won't get in, but if we use the new password of 200, we should get in without any problems. Okay, now that we've created student accounts for everybody from the class list file, we've essentially created database entries in the WeBWorK database for all of the users in that class list file. And they are by default student level accounts. So let's up the permission level by editing some users. So for instance, if I want to select all of the users all at once, I can check this box up here next to login name. Of course, I could select individuals one at a time if I wanted to. And what do I want to do with them? I want to edit those users that I selected. So I'll click the Edit tab, and I've got the option to edit all, or just the visible users, or the selected users. I'll choose selected users. That seems a little safer. So editing the selected users should give me a table of users together with their name and email address and so on. And if I scroll all the way over to the rightmost column, there's a column called permission level. So to create professor level accounts for all of you, I could have set the permission level in that spreadsheet file that I uploaded, but I chose not to intentionally. And let's go ahead and upgrade everybody to a professor level account. So now that we've selected all those accounts to be upgraded to professor, let's go ahead and click the Take Action button, which is near the top of the page. And we'll see that the changes were saved, and let's make sure that we actually did this correctly. And yep, it looks like the permission level now just says professor. Okay, and I don't think that you'll need to do any logging in or logging out for these changes to take effect. However, you will want to refresh your web browser in order for them to take effect. So when you click refresh, you should see an instructor tools menu, which is what I have already. Okay. Well, I guess okay, for editing student information, again, if we go to the Classlist Editor, oops, I'm scrolling too fast, and click the Edit button, we can choose users, and for these selected users, let's edit them, and we'll see a table come up, and this person's first name was Tim Lauk. I'm sorry, I don't have S. Koski's last first name here or Tim Lauk's email, but say that we got this information from them and we wanted to update the database, then we could save those changes. The only thing you're not allowed to change is the login name, because that's used as sort of the key to all the database entries. If you wanted to change the login name, you would instead have to create a new user account with a different login name. And then also one common thing that you'll be asked to do is to deal with students who have accidentally forgotten what their password is. So under the Classlist Editor, if we click the password feature, we can select some users. How about I select P. Pearson? I don't want to mess up any of your accounts. We can give them a new password and click Take Action.
And actually, Paul, it might be useful to use John's student account rather than one of the professor accounts.
Okay. So one of the questions in the chat window was about the Act as a User feature. So in the Classlist Editor, let's suppose that we want to act as the student, John Travis. So we click on their username, and notice that we are logged in as a professor, but we are currently acting as this student, John T. So now if we were to click on a problem set and a problem, we would see the exact randomization that the student, John T, sees. The comment in the chat window is saying something about it's kind of confusing about, one thing that's confusing is that while you are acting as this student, you don't necessarily have a Submit Answers button. So personally, when I'm working on a WeBWorK problem with a student in my office and they have forgotten their computer, I'll just bring up WeBWorK on my computer and help them with the problem. And if during the course of that discussion we actually solve the problem, I don't see it as a very useful thing to have the student go away, have to log into WeBWorK separately, enter that answer, and so forth, when I've got WeBWorK open right there in my office right at the time. So I will typically enter an answer for a student under those circumstances that they've actually done the work and gotten it correct. And the way to enable that feature would be through the course configuration, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail at some point. And we want to be permitted to do that. So we'll click on Permissions, the Permissions tab, allowed to act, can submit answers for a student. That's one of the options. Right now, nobody can do that. If I change that to professor, then everybody who's got professor level permissions will be able to submit an answer for a student. So now, while I'm still acting as John Travis student, I can go back to that homework problem, and assuming that this homework set is open, I should see a Submit Answers button down here, and I can actually submit answers as John Travis, the student. Of course, you have to be aware of what mode you're in, and if you're in this student mode and want to get out of it, you click the Stop Acting button, and then you are back to the randomized version of the problem that was assigned to you by your random seed.